Just a Hug by Sister Terry Rowans, narrated by Sister Erin Petruto. Several weeks ago, my stepdaughter went into the hospital to have major back surgery for scoliosis. When her surgery was over, she had to spend 2 days in the ICU so they could monitor her closely. Please keep in mind that her surgery was in a children's hospital in New York. On her first day in the ICU, I noticed a young child in the room next to hers. When I looked in the room, my heart ached. The child laid there lifeless, hooked up to so many machines and at least 6 IVs. With bandages on his or her head, we left the hospital that night, feeling grateful that my stepdaughter was there to recuperate and not for another reason. The next day, we arrived at the hospital earlier in the day, and again I noticed the same child laying in bed. I saw a woman in the room with the child and gave her a heartfelt smile. Later in the day, my husband and I were leaving the room to get some lunch, and I noticed this woman crouching on the floor crying on the phone. My heart went out to her immediately. As we walked away, I suddenly felt something prompting me to go to her. Not to say a word, but just to lend a shoulder. I walked up to her and just hugged her. There were no words other than an unspoken knowing of a mother's pain. I let her cry for a minute on my shoulder and then walked away. My husband and I left with tears in our eyes, thanking God for the health of our children. When we returned from lunch, I noticed the woman was no longer there. The child in the room was being taken for a test, and I stood and watched how the nurses had to remove machines from the room and maneuver everything that was working to keep the child's care going. A few hours later, we were informed that my stepdaughter was moving to a regular room. When we walked past the child's room, no one was there. As we exited the ICU, we passed a small room where families could sit. As someone opened the door, I saw the woman I had hugged sitting inside. My heart once again tugged, telling me to give her some form of strength. There were no words for me to say to make her situation better, so I just ran into the room and hugged her again. But when we were in the elevator, I felt God wanting me to say more. We got to our new room and the nurses were leaving. I asked if I could go back to the ICU floor with them. I had to see this woman one more time. The nurse brought me back to the floor and I found the woman in the room again with her family. I walked in and just said, "I have no words to say other than I will pray for you." I didn't want to know what the child's condition or situation was, but God had put it on my heart to show this woman love and comfort. I have no idea what happened to this child, but I know that whatever the Lord decided, this child would either recover or be welcomed into heaven. I could never imagine how the Lord felt as he watched his own son being placed on the cross and the pain he had to endure. But because of his victory over that pain, we now have his eternal love to share with others. And sometimes that's all people need, to feel the love of God with a simple word or gesture, and to know there are others in this world who care.